I'm Jessica Walker, 34, and last Tuesday I got the call that shattered everything I thought I knew about family. After paying $60,000 to save my parents' house from foreclosure 5 years ago, they've completely written me out of their will. My younger brother Andrew, who hasn't contributed a dime, gets everything. I still remember my hands shaking as I wrote that check, believing I was doing the right thing. Now Mom's calling again, asking for more money. The betrayal cuts deeper than I ever imagined possible. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If family financial drama resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories about navigating complicated relationships. Trust me, this journey from sacrifice to betrayal has lessons for everyone. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, our family appeared perfectly normal from the outside. Our two-story colonial home with the white picket fence in Fairfield County housed what neighbors probably thought was the ideal American family. My father Robert worked as an accountant at a respectable firm in Hartford, putting in 60-hour weeks during tax season. My mother Patricia managed our household with precision, volunteering at school functions and maintaining our family's social calendar. But within those walls, a different reality existed. From my earliest memories, I understood that my place in the family came with conditions. I was 7 when my brother Andrew was born, and the shift in family dynamics became my first lesson in conditional love. "Jessica, you need to set a good example," became my mother's constant refrain. While that might sound like standard parenting, it came with an unspoken addition, because Andrew doesn't have to. My father's approach to parenting us couldn't have been more different. When I brought home straight A's in middle school, his response was typically, "That's what we expect from you." When Andrew brought home C's, Dad would take him out for ice cream as a reward for trying his best. I learned early that achievement wasn't something to be celebrated, it was the baseline expectation for me. Mom maintained the household with military precision when it came to my responsibilities. My bed needed to be made before school, my homework completed before dinner, and any extracurricular activities had to be balanced with household chores. Meanwhile, Andrew's room remained perpetually messy, his homework often completed with Mom sitting beside him, practically holding his hand through each problem. "Your brother just needs more support," she'd explain when I questioned the difference. "You've always been independent." Independence wasn't a choice, it was thrust upon me. By 16, I was working part-time at the local library, saving money for college while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. I joined debate club, played volleyball, and volunteered at the animal shelter, building a resume that would hopefully earn me scholarships. One particular memory stands out from my junior year. I had been accepted into a prestigious summer program at Columbia University, but it cost $2,000. When I approached my parents about it, Dad immediately shook his head. "We don't have extra money for things like that, Jessica. You know college is coming up." That same month, they bought Andrew a $1,500 gaming system for his 11th birthday. When I pointed out the discrepancy, Mom sighed that exasperated sigh I'd grown to hate. "Your brother struggles socially. This will help him connect with friends." I worked double shifts that summer instead of attending the program. The rejection stung, but I was used to it by then. My high school graduation should have been a celebration. I was valedictorian, had secured a partial scholarship to Boston University, and had saved nearly $10,000 from my part-time jobs. During my speech, I caught my mother dabbing at her eyes, but later at dinner, the conversation quickly turned to Andrew's middle school basketball tournament. "Tell them about your three-pointer, buddy," Dad beamed, while my acceptance to Boston University collected dust in the conversation. College brought blessed distance. I threw myself into my finance classes, discovering a natural aptitude for understanding money, perhaps born from years of watching my parents' inconsistent approach to it. I worked through school, taking out minimal loans that I was determined to pay off quickly. During holiday breaks, I picked up retail jobs rather than heading home for extended periods. Meanwhile, my parents called regularly with updates about Andrew's high school exploits, each achievement magnified as if he'd discovered the cure for cancer. When he was accepted to the state university with average grades and no financial aid, My parents took out a second mortgage to cover his expenses. We want him to have the full college experience without worrying about money, Mom explained. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was working 30 hours a week while maintaining a 3.9 GPA to avoid student loan debt, while Andrew was pledging a fraternity and barely passing his classes on my parents' dime. During my senior year, when I secured an internship at a prestigious financial firm in Boston, my father's response was, "Just make sure you're still focusing on your grades." When Andrew made the intramural soccer team at his university, my parents drove 5 hours to watch his first game. After graduation, I accepted a full-time position at the financial firm, moved into a shared apartment with 2 roommates, and began my adult life properly. I called home every Sunday, listening to updates about Andrew's college adventures while my own achievements at work went unacknowledged. "That's nice, dear," Mom would say after I mentioned a promotion. "Did I tell you Andrew's thinking about studying abroad next semester?" I maintained this cordial but distant relationship with my family throughout my 20s, visiting on major holidays and sending appropriate birthday and Christmas gifts. I learned to manage my expectations, finding validation in my career accomplishments instead of seeking it from my parents. It wasn't perfect, but I had created a life that was mine, built on my own terms without their financial support or emotional approval. What I didn't realize then was that this pattern of family dynamics was setting the stage for a much larger betrayal down the road. One that would test not just my relationship with my parents, but my very understanding of what family means. Boston became my sanctuary. After 2 years at the financial firm, I earned my first significant promotion to junior advisor. The city's energy matched my ambition, fast-paced, forward-thinking, and full of opportunity. My tiny shared apartment eventually gave way to a studio of my own in Beacon Hill, where I could walk to work in the financial district. At 26, I met Michael at a charity fundraiser hosted by my firm. He worked as an architect at a firm specializing in sustainable urban development. Where my family had always viewed my ambition as something unseemly in a daughter, Michael saw it as something to admire. Our relationship developed around mutual respect, something I hadn't experienced growing up. "You've built something impressive here," he said during our third date, genuinely interested in my career trajectory. "What's your 5-year plan?" No one had ever asked me that question before. My parents had never shown interest in my professional goals beyond vague acknowledgments. Michael not only asked, but listened intently as I mapped out my aspirations to become a senior financial advisor specializing in women's financial independence. By 28, I had paid off my student loans, an achievement that left me breathless with pride. I called my parents to share the news. "That's nice, honey," Mom said distractedly. "Did we tell you Andrew just bought a new car? It's a bit above his budget, but he says it's important for client meetings." Andrew had graduated with a marketing degree and was working entry-level at an advertising agency. From what I gathered during our infrequent text exchanges, he was spending well beyond his means. "How's he affording a new car?" I asked. "Oh, your father co-signed the loan," Mom said casually. "You know how important first impressions are in his field." I bit my tongue, remembering how I'd taken the bus for 3 years after college to save money. The familiar sting of different standards resurfaced, but I pushed it down. At 30, I achieved another milestone, purchasing my first property. It wasn't large, a 1-bedroom condo in South End, but it was mine. Michael had moved in with me, and we were discussing marriage. The down payment came entirely from my savings, something I'd accomplished through careful budgeting and strategic investing. I invited my parents to see the new place, hoping that this tangible sign of success might finally earn their recognition. They visited for a weekend, Mom immediately pointing out all the ways the space could be improved, Dad questioning whether the investment was sound. "Property taxes in the city are outrageous," he commented, looking around critically. "You should have bought in the suburbs." "I work in the city, Dad. This location cuts my commute to 10 minutes. He shrugged. "Still seems impractical." During their visit, Mom casually mentioned that Andrew was having a bit of financial trouble after being laid off from his 3rd job in 2 years. "We're helping him out until he finds something stable," she explained. "He's staying in our guest room for now." Again? I asked before I could stop myself. Mom's expression tightened. Not everyone finds their path as easily as you did, Jessica. The irony of describing my carefully constructed career as easy wasn't lost on me. Nothing about my success had been handed to me, unlike Andrew's seemingly endless safety net. Michael noticed the tension, and later that night, after my parents had gone to their hotel, he broached the subject carefully. "Your parents don't seem to recognize how hard you've worked," he observed. "Is it always like that?" I nodded, the familiar knot forming in my throat. They've always had different standards for Andrew and me. I'm expected to be self-sufficient. He's expected to need help. That doesn't seem fair to either of you, Michael said. It infantilizes him and dismisses your achievements. His observation crystallized something I'd felt but never articulated. The dynamic wasn't just unfair to me, it was harmful to Andrew too, keeping him dependent and unprepared for adult responsibility. My professional success continued to grow. At 32, I was promoted to senior financial advisor, managing a portfolio of high-net-worth clients. Michael and I got engaged, planning a modest but elegant wedding. When we called my parents with the news, their first question was whether Andrew would be in the wedding party. We were thinking of asking Michael's brother to be best man, I explained. But Andrew would be so hurt, Mom protested. He's your only brother. Despite the fact that Andrew and I barely spoke except at family gatherings, I found myself pressured into including him. It was easier than dealing with the family drama that would ensue otherwise. Our wedding planning revealed more about the family dynamic. When we discussed the budget with my future in-laws, they immediately offered to contribute a significant amount. My parents, when approached about the traditional father of the bride expenses, hemmed and hawed. "Things are a bit tight right now," Dad explained. "Andrew's still getting back on his feet, and we've had some unexpected expenses." I hadn't expected them to contribute, having planned to pay for everything ourselves, but the contrast between Michael's parents' enthusiasm and my parents' reluctance was stark. Michael's parents treated our marriage as a celebration, mine treated it as an imposition. The wedding itself was beautiful despite these undercurrents. I had built a life to be proud of, with a partner who valued me, a career that fulfilled me, and friends who supported me. If my family couldn't see my worth, I had others who could. What I didn't know then was that my parents' financial situation was far more precarious than they had let on. The tight finances weren't just about supporting Andrew, they were heading toward a crisis that would soon pull me back into the family dynamic I'd worked so hard to escape. The call came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in April, 3 years after my wedding. I was between client meetings when my mother's name flashed on my phone screen. I almost sent it to voicemail. Our conversations had become increasingly strained, but something made me answer. "Jessica." Mom's voice sounded different, tight with panic. "We need your help." Over the next 20 minutes, the truth about my parents' financial situation unfolded. The family home, the colonial I'd grown up in, was 3 months behind on mortgage payments. Foreclosure proceedings had begun. They needed $60,000 to catch up on the mortgage and pay off the most pressing debts, or they would lose the house within 30 days. "How did this happen?" I asked, stunned. "My father was an accountant, for heaven's sake." Mom's explanation was fragmented: medical bills from Dad's knee surgery last year, helping Andrew with his credit card debt, a home equity line they'd taken out to renovate the kitchen that now had a balloon payment due. The full picture emerged gradually: years of financial mismanagement, enabling Andrew and living beyond their means had finally caught up with them. "Why didn't you come to me sooner? Before it got this bad?" I asked, professional instincts kicking in. Earlier intervention could have prevented this crisis. "We didn't want to worry you," Mom said, though the subtext was clear. They hadn't wanted to admit failure to their successful daughter. "Have you asked Andrew to help?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. "You know he's not in a position to help, Jessica," Mom replied sharply. "He's still getting established. You're the successful one." My success, normally dismissed, was suddenly relevant when they needed financial assistance. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I need to think about this," I told her. "I'll call you back tomorrow." That evening, Michael and I sat at our dining table, spreadsheets open on my laptop, discussing options. We had been saving for a down payment on a house of our own, planning to start a family soon. $60,000 would deplete most of those savings. It's your decision, Michael said carefully. But I think we need to be clear about whether this is a gift or a loan, and get everything in writing if it's the latter. I nodded, the financial advisor in me agreeing completely while the daughter in me cringed at the formality. But Michael was right, boundaries were necessary. Their family, I said, the weight of obligation heavy in my chest. I can't let them lose their home. Family works both ways, Michael reminded me gently. When was the last time they put your needs first? His question hung in the air, unanswerable because we both knew the truth. Still, I couldn't bring myself to refuse them. Despite everything, they were my parents. The next day, I called my mother back. I can help, I said, but we need to be clear about terms. This will be a loan, not a gift, with a formal repayment plan. Mom's relief was palpable, though she seemed taken aback by my conditions. That seems so formal for family, she protested weakly. It's how I protect everyone involved, I explained, my professional voice taking over. I'll draw up a simple agreement with reasonable monthly payments and a low interest rate. When I arrived at their house that weekend with the paperwork and my checkbook, the atmosphere was tense. Dad seemed embarrassed, Mom anxious, and Andrew, who apparently still lived at home, was conspicuously absent despite knowing I was coming. I explained the terms of the loan agreement. 5-year repayment period, 2% interest, far below market rate, monthly payments of about $1,000. Dad frowned at the document. This makes it seem like we're strangers, not family, he commented, pen hovering above the signature line. It's standard practice, I explained. This protects our relationship by keeping expectations clear. They signed reluctantly, making me feel like the villain for imposing structure on the arrangement. After the paperwork was complete, I wrote the check for $60,000, a surreal moment watching so much of my hard-earned savings transfer back to the family that had never supported my efforts to build that financial security. Mom took the check with minimal thanks, as if I was simply fulfilling an expected family obligation rather than making an extraordinary sacrifice. The conversation quickly turned to Andrew's recent job interview and Dad's golf game, the financial crisis apparently resolved in their minds now that I had solved it. As I prepared to leave, Mom hugged me briefly. Family takes care of family, she said, as if that explained everything. The statement rang hollow given the one-directional nature of the care in our relationship. During the drive back to Boston, Michael asked how it went. They signed the agreement, but acted like I was being cold for wanting one, I said, still processing the interaction. And Andrew didn't even show up. Where was he? Golf with friends, apparently, I replied, the familiar sting of different standards resurfacing. Are you okay? Michael asked, reaching for my hand. I don't know, I admitted. I keep hoping each interaction with them will be different, but it never is. Over the next few weeks, I waited for some acknowledgement of the significant financial help I'd provided. Perhaps a thank you card, a phone call expressing genuine gratitude, something to indicate they understood the magnitude of my assistance. Nothing came beyond a brief text from Mom saying, everything went through with the bank, all fixed now. I tried to focus on the positive. My parents wouldn't lose their home, and we had a clear repayment plan in place. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just enabled a pattern that would continue. Worse, I feared I would never see that money again, despite the signed agreement. I was right to worry. The first payment on the loan was due in June, 30 days after I'd written the check. June 15th came and went with no payment and no communication from my parents. I waited a few days, giving them the benefit of the doubt, before sending a gentle reminder text to my mother. Hi Mom, just checking in about the loan payment that was due on the 15th. Her response came hours later. Things are still a bit tight this month. We'll catch up soon. No apology, no timeline, just a vague promise. I tried to be understanding. They were recovering from a financial crisis, after all, but the casual dismissal of our agreement stung. By July, there was still no payment. This time, I called rather than texted. We're still getting back on our feet, Dad explained, an edge of irritation in his voice. The agreement says we have 5 years. What's the rush? The agreement also specifies monthly payments beginning in June. I reminded him, trying to keep my tone professional rather than emotional. We'll start in August, he said firmly. Things should be more stable by then. August arrived with a partial payment, $500 instead of the agreed-upon $1,000. September brought another partial payment, followed by an October with no payment at all. Each time I brought it up, excuses mounted, unexpected car repairs, property taxes due, helping Andrew with his security deposit for a new apartment. Meanwhile, Michael and I had put our house hunting plans on hold. The $60,000 loan had depleted our down payment savings, and the irregular repayments meant we couldn't reliably rebuild that fund. I think we need to accept that we might not get all of that money back, Michael said carefully one evening. At least not on the timeline we expected. I knew he was right, but admitting it felt like another betrayal. My parents had signed an agreement. They were treating my financial sacrifice as an inconvenience to them rather than the significant gesture it was. That winter, we began planning our wedding anniversary celebration, a small dinner party with close friends. When I mentioned it to Mom during our monthly call, she immediately asked, "Are you inviting Andrew?" "We're just having a few close friends," I explained. "It's not a family event." "He's been feeling left out of your life," she said, guilt creeping into her tone. It would mean a lot to him. The request seemed absurd given that Andrew and I barely maintained a relationship, but the prospect of refusing and dealing with the family fallout was exhausting. "I'll think about it," I said noncommittally. Later that week, Dad called, a rare occurrence, to press the issue of including Andrew in our anniversary dinner. "It would be good for him to see your successful friends," he explained. "He's networking for a new job opportunity." Our anniversary celebration had suddenly become about Andrew's career prospects rather than our marriage milestone. It was so typical that I almost laughed. "Dad, this is a celebration for me and Michael. It's not a networking event for Andrew." His tone cooled immediately. I thought family would be important to include in an anniversary celebration. The guilt trip was familiar territory. This time, however, I stood my ground. We're celebrating with the people who have supported our marriage this past year. If we plan a family event later, we'll certainly include Andrew. The conversation ended shortly after, with clear disapproval from my father. The following day, Mom texted to inform me they wouldn't be sending an anniversary gift because funds are tight right now, though they hadn't sent gifts in previous years either. 2 weeks later, I discovered through a casual comment from Mom that my parents had helped Andrew purchase a new car, a purchase that somehow took priority over repaying their debt to me. When I pressed for details, she admitted they had given him $10,000 for a down payment. He needed reliable transportation for his new job, she explained defensively. "And what about the loan repayment to me?" I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. "That money was supposed to come to me this month." "Jessica, don't be selfish. Your brother needed help. You're doing fine financially." The double standard was so blatant it took my breath away. My financial assistance was taken for granted, while Andrew's needs continued to take priority. The realization that my parents viewed my success as a reason to expect endless giving, rather than as an achievement to celebrate, crystallized in that moment. The situation came to a head at a family dinner during the holidays. After months of irregular and insufficient loan payments, I finally addressed the elephant in the room when Dad mentioned the new golf clubs he'd purchased. "I'm struggling to understand how there's money for new golf clubs and Andrew's car, but not for the loan payments we agreed upon," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The table fell silent. Mom's face tightened, Dad's complexion reddened, and Andrew stared at his plate. "I don't think this is an appropriate dinner conversation," Mom finally said. "When is it appropriate then?" "My texts and calls about it go unanswered." "You're making this awkward for everyone," Dad said sharply. "We've had financial difficulties. You know that. Difficulties that apparently don't prevent spending on everything except repaying me," I pointed out. Andrew finally looked up. "Not everyone has a fancy finance job like you, Jess. Some of us are still struggling." The unfairness of this comment, coming from someone who had benefited repeatedly from parental financial support while I'd been left to fend for myself, was too much. "I worked for everything I have," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "No one helped me with college, or a car, or rent, or any of the things Mom and Dad have covered for you. I still chose to help when they were about to lose the house. All I'm asking is that they honor the agreement they signed." Dad pushed back from the table. "I think it's time for you to leave." The drive home was silent, tears streaming down my face as Michael navigated the familiar roads away from my childhood home. The relationship had been damaged in a way that felt irreparable. For the first time, I had directly challenged the family dynamic, and the response had been swift rejection. The following months brought minimal contact from my parents. The loan payments stopped entirely. When I reached out about the agreement, my texts went unanswered. My hurt gradually hardened into resentment, though I tried to suppress it. After all, they were still my parents, and some childish part of me still longed for their approval and love. 2 years passed with little improvement in our relationship. The loan payments had become sporadic at best, a few $100s every few months, always accompanied by an excuse about tight finances. I'd essentially written off the money mentally, considering it the price of learning a painful lesson about family dynamics. Michael and I had adjusted our financial plans, rebuilding our savings more slowly than anticipated, but making progress nonetheless. We'd finally purchased a modest home in a suburb outside Boston, choosing a smaller property than originally planned, but one we could afford without the repayments I'd expected from my parents. Then came another call from my mother. "Jessica, we need to discuss something important," she began without preamble. "The house needs some major repairs. The foundation has issues, and we've got some water damage from last winter." I waited, already sensing where this conversation was heading. "We've gotten estimates, and it's going to cost about $25,000, she continued. "Your father and I were hoping you might be able to help us out again." The audacity was breathtaking. After failing to repay the $60,000 loan, they were asking for more money. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "Mom, you and Dad haven't fulfilled the repayment agreement for the last loan. I can't consider giving more money when that situation hasn't been resolved." Her tone shifted immediately, the familiar guilt tactics emerging. "After everything we've done for you, Jessica? We raised you, put a roof over your head, provided for you all those years. This is how you repay that?" The irony of her using the word repay wasn't lost on me. "What about the actual repayment we agreed upon for the $60,000? The money that helped you keep that roof over your heads?" "That's different," she countered. "That was a crisis situation. This is family helping family." "It doesn't seem different to me, Mom. Family helping family should work both ways, including honoring financial agreements." "I never thought you'd become so cold and calculating," she said, her voice trembling with what seemed like practiced emotion. "Money matters more to you than family now, is that it?" The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with her tearful accusation that I had changed, become heartless and selfish. After we hung up, I sat in my home office, shaking with anger and hurt. Michael found me there an hour later, still processing the conversation. When I explained what had happened, he suggested something he'd mentioned before, but I'd resisted. "I think you should consider talking to someone professional about this," he said gently. "A therapist who specializes in family dynamics. This pattern keeps repeating, and it's taking a toll on you." This time, I agreed. The next week, I had my first appointment with Dr. Levine, a therapist specializing in family relationships and financial trauma. Over the following months, our sessions helped me understand the deeply ingrained patterns in my family. "What you're describing is a classic golden child/scapegoat dynamic," Dr. Levine explained during one session. "Your brother was cast as the golden child who could do no wrong and always deserved support, while you were the scapegoat, expected to be self-sufficient and criticized when you weren't perfect." "But why?" I asked. "Why create that dynamic with your children?" "Often it's unconscious, a repetition of patterns from the parents' own families. Sometimes it's about gender expectations. Sometimes one child simply reminds a parent of themselves or someone else in ways that trigger certain responses. Over time, I gained clarity about the situation. The loan repayment wasn't just about money. It was about respect, recognition, and reciprocity that had always been absent from my relationship with my parents. Dr. Levine helped me craft a response to my mother's request for additional funds, a clear, compassionate, but firm refusal that established boundaries without unnecessary cruelty. The email I eventually sent was straightforward. I couldn't provide additional financial assistance while the previous loan remained largely unpaid. I suggested they explore home equity options with their bank or consider whether the repairs could be broken into smaller, more manageable projects over time. My mother's response was chilling. "We're very disappointed in your decision. We had hoped our relationship meant more to you than money. This will certainly be remembered when we're making decisions about the future." The thinly veiled threat about inheritance might have wounded me deeply before therapy. Now, I recognized it as another manipulation tactic, using future theoretical money to control present behavior. Days later, Andrew sent a series of text messages accusing me of abandoning the family when they needed help. "Mom's been crying for days," he wrote. "Dad says they might have to sell the house because of you." I didn't respond immediately, taking time to process my feelings rather than reacting defensively. Eventually, I sent a simple reply: "I'm sorry they're struggling. I've already helped substantially and am still waiting for the agreed-upon repayment of that help. I hope you're in a position to assist them this time." He didn't reply. The emotional toll of maintaining boundaries was significant, but for the first time, I felt clear about my position. My parents' financial problems weren't my responsibility to solve, especially when they had demonstrated they didn't respect my financial boundaries. My circle of support expanded during this difficult period. Friends who had witnessed similar family dynamics shared their experiences. Michael's parents continued to show what healthy family relationships could look like, offering emotional support without financial entanglements. Dr. Levine helped me work through the grief of accepting my family for who they truly were, rather than who I had hoped they might become. "It's like mourning," she explained. "You're grieving the parents you deserved but never had." This period of establishing boundaries and processing grief was painful but necessary. I was building a healthier relationship with the concept of family, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation and guilt. What I didn't realize was that my parents were about to make their priorities crystal clear in a way I couldn't have anticipated. 6 months after refusing the additional loan, we gathered at my parents' house for Dad's 70th birthday. The atmosphere was strained but civil. Mom had called to specifically request my presence, saying it was important to the family that everyone attend. Michael couldn't join due to a work commitment, which left me facing the family dynamics alone. The celebration was modest, dinner at home with a store-bought cake. Andrew arrived late, making a grand entrance with an expensive watch as a gift for Dad, who made a show of how thoughtful and generous his son was. After dinner, I volunteered to clear the dishes, needing a moment away from the forced conversation in the dining room. As I loaded the dishwasher, I overheard Dad and Andrew speaking in the adjacent study, their voices carrying through the partially open door. "The appointment with the lawyer went well," Dad was saying. "The will is finalized now." "And everything's set up the way we discussed?" Andrew asked. "Yes," Dad replied. "The house, investments, everything will come to you. You'll need it more than your sister. Jessica is already successful. She has her fancy job and Michael's income. You're still getting established." My hands froze on the plate I was rinsing. I hadn't expected to be completely written out of the will. Despite our differences, despite the loan situation, some part of me had believed that when it came to something as final as inheritance, I would be treated equally. "What about the loan she gave you guys?" Andrew asked, a note of concern in his voice that surprised me. "That's considered already given," Dad said dismissively. "She's fine financially. Your mother and I agree this is the fairest approach given your different situations." I stood motionless in the kitchen, water running over my hands, as the reality sank in. Not only had they failed to repay the loan that had saved their home, but they had now formalized their intention to leave everything to Andrew, including the house my money had preserved. The betrayal felt complete. I finished loading the dishwasher mechanically, my mind racing with hurt and anger. When I returned to the dining room, Mom noticed my expression. Is everything all right, Jessica? You look pale. I considered letting it go, maintaining the facade of family harmony for Dad's birthday. But something in me had reached its breaking point. I overheard Dad and Andrew talking about the will. I said quietly. The room fell silent. Dad's expression hardened, Mom looked away, and Andrew suddenly became very interested in his dessert. I think we should discuss this privately, Dad finally said, standing up. In his study, with the door closed, my parents confirmed what I'd overheard. They had indeed written me out of the will entirely, with everything going to Andrew. You've always been the strong one, the capable one, Mom explained, as if this justified their decision. Andrew needs the security more than you do. What about the $60,000 I loaned you? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil inside. The money that saved this very house you're now planning to leave entirely to Andrew? Dad shifted uncomfortably. That was a gift from a daughter to her parents. It wasn't a gift. We signed a loan agreement. An agreement you've barely honored. Paperwork doesn't change the nature of family obligations, he replied dismissively. Besides, we've considered that money part of your inheritance, given in advance. An inheritance I'm now being told doesn't exist. Mom reached for my hand, which I pulled away. Jessica, try to understand. Andrew has always struggled. He needs this security net. You've built your own security. The circular logic was maddening. My success, achieved without their help, was being used as justification to deny me what would typically be considered my birthright, while Andrew's continued financial dependence was being rewarded with everything. So I'm being punished for being responsible, I said flatly. And Andrew is being rewarded for needing constant bailouts. That's a very cold way to look at family, Dad replied, frowning. Is it? Because from where I stand, using my success as an excuse to write me out of your will while failing to repay the money I loaned you seems pretty cold too. The conversation went nowhere. Their minds were made up, their justifications rehearsed. To them, this decision made perfect sense within their family narrative. Jessica doesn't need help, Andrew does. Jessica is strong, Andrew is vulnerable. Jessica will be fine, Andrew won't. When I left the study, Andrew was waiting in the hallway, an uncomfortable expression on his face. For a moment, I thought he might express some discomfort with the situation, some recognition of its fundamental unfairness. Instead, he said, I hope you're not going to make a big deal about this. It's what Mom and Dad want. The drive home was a blur of tears and anger. I called Michael from a rest stop, unable to continue driving while so emotionally overwhelmed. They've written me out of the will completely, I explained between sobs. Everything goes to Andrew. They're not even planning to repay the loan. They're calling it an advance on an inheritance that I'm not getting. Michael's outrage on my behalf was both comforting and validating. That's beyond unfair, Jess. It's cruel. The worst part is that they don't even see it that way, I said. They genuinely believe this makes sense because I'm successful and strong while Andrew needs help. Do you want me to come get you? I don't like the idea of you driving home this upset. His concern was touching, so different from my family's dismissal of my feelings. No, I'll be okay. I just needed to stop for a bit and process. The following week was one of the most difficult of my life. I cycled through grief, rage, hurt, and eventually, a strange sort of clarity. The will revelation wasn't really a new betrayal, it was merely the formalization of the dynamic that had always existed in our family. I had never been valued equally. I had never been seen accurately. I had always been expected to give more and receive less. In my next therapy session, Dr. Levine helped me process these realizations. The pain you're feeling is real and valid, she assured me. What they've done reflects their limitations, not your worth. I keep thinking I should have expected this, I admitted. The signs were always there. Often we hold on to hope with family longer than evidence warrants, she replied gently. There's nothing wrong with having hoped for better from your parents. As the initial shock faded, I found myself facing a decision about what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted to maintain with my family moving forward. The inheritance itself wasn't the core issue, it was what it represented about how they valued me and my contributions to the family. The weeks following Dad's birthday party were a period of profound grief. I mourned not just the inheritance I wouldn't receive, but the parents I had never had and would never have, parents who valued me equally, who celebrated my successes rather than using them against me, who gave as generously as they took. My therapy sessions with Dr. Levine became a lifeline during this time. She helped me understand that my grief was complex, layered with childhood disappointments, adult betrayals, and the final recognition that the relationship would never become what I had hoped for. Sometimes the healthiest thing we can do is accept the reality of who our family members are, rather than continuing to hope they'll become who we need them to be, she explained. One particularly difficult session centered around the loan money. I should try to get it back legally, shouldn't I? I asked. The agreement is binding. Dr. Levine's response was measured. Legally, yes, you likely have recourse. But I'd encourage you to consider the emotional cost of pursuing that route. Sometimes the price of remaining entangled is higher than the money you might recover. I consulted with a lawyer friend who specialized in family law. Her assessment was straightforward. Yes, I could sue to recover the loan, and with the signed agreement, I would likely win. But the process would be lengthy, expensive, and extraordinarily bitter. Family lawsuits are some of the ugliest I handle, she told me frankly. You need to be certain the financial recovery is worth the emotional damage. After careful consideration and discussions with Michael, I made the difficult decision not to pursue legal action. The loan, now about $50,000 with the minimal payments they had made, would be considered the final price of my freedom from toxic family dynamics. I think it's the right choice, Michael said when I shared my decision. Not because the money isn't rightfully yours, but because your peace is worth more. We had a serious conversation about our own future family plans. With my parents' example so clearly before us, we talked explicitly about how we would approach parenting differently. I never want any child of ours to feel the way my parents made me feel, I told Michael. Like their worth is conditional on their neediness. Our children will be valued for who they are, not what they achieve or what they need, Michael promised. And they'll be treated with fundamental fairness. This conversation about our theoretical future children helped heal something in me, the recognition that toxic patterns can be identified and broken, that family dynamics aren't destined to repeat across generations. Setting boundaries with my parents proved challenging but necessary. I reduced contact to monthly phone calls and occasional holiday visits. When Mom complained about the distance, I was honest without being cruel. I need some space to process how our relationship has evolved, I explained. The loan situation and the inheritance decision have hurt me deeply. You're punishing us because we can't afford to repay your loan right now, she accused. No, Mom. I'm creating distance because you and Dad have demonstrated repeatedly that you value me differently than you value Andrew. That hurts, and I need space to heal from that hurt. 6 months after the will revelation, the phone call I had half expected finally came. It was Andrew. Hey Jess, he began awkwardly. I was hoping we could talk. What's on your mind? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. I'm in a bit of a financial bind, he admitted. I was wondering if I could borrow some money. Just until my commission comes through next quarter. The irony was almost too perfect. After being written out of the will in favor of Andrew, because I was financially secure and he needed help, he was now directly asking me for money. How much are you looking for? I asked, curiosity overriding my initial impulse to refuse outright. $15,000, he said, as if it were a small amount. I'd pay you back with interest. I took a deep breath. Andrew, I don't think that would be healthy for either of us. Mom and Dad still haven't repaid the loan that saved their house. Adding another loan to the family dynamic wouldn't be wise. This would be different, he insisted. This would be directly between us. The previous arrangement was supposed to be straightforward too, I reminded him. But it became entangled with family expectations and resentments. I don't want to repeat that pattern. So, you're refusing to help your only brother? His tone shifted to the familiar family guilt tactics. I'm refusing to enter another financial arrangement with family members who have demonstrated they don't respect financial boundaries, I clarified. It's not personal, Andrew. It's about maintaining healthy relationships. After that conversation, Andrew's sporadic texts stopped entirely. Mom called to berate me for abandoning your brother when he needed you, confirming that Andrew had immediately reported my refusal to our parents. I've already helped this family substantially, I reminded her. That help was neither appreciated nor respected. I'm not in a position to offer more. The estrangement that followed was painful but clarifying. Without the constant drain of trying to earn approval that would never come, I found myself focusing more energy on relationships that were genuinely reciprocal. Michael's family welcomed me with warmth that highlighted what had been missing in my own family. His parents treated us both with equal respect and affection, celebrated our accomplishments without resentment, and offered help without keeping score. Our circle of friends expanded, creating what many therapists call a chosen family, people connected by mutual care and respect rather than just biology. These relationships offered healing in their healthiness, showing me what genuine reciprocity felt like. About a year after the will revelation, Michael and I discovered I was pregnant. The joy of this news was complicated by questions about how much relationship my child would have with my parents and brother. After careful consideration, I decided to share the news with them, keeping my expectations realistic. Mom expressed excitement about becoming a grandmother, though her first question was whether Andrew would be the godfather of a role we'd already asked Michael's brother to fill. As my pregnancy progressed, I continued my therapy sessions, working through concerns about replicating harmful patterns with my own child. Dr. Levine helped me recognize that my awareness of these dynamics was already a significant step toward breaking them. The very fact that you're questioning these patterns means you're unlikely to blindly repeat them, she assured me. During my 7th month of pregnancy, I received an unexpected text from Andrew. I've been thinking about things. Can we talk? We met at a cafe near my office. Andrew seemed different, less entitled, more thoughtful. He had recently begun therapy himself, prompted by relationship difficulties that had made him question his patterns. My therapist helped me see some things about our family dynamics, he admitted. The way Mom and Dad created different roles for us. It wasn't fair to either of us. The acknowledgement was stunning in its self-awareness. For the first time, Andrew seemed to recognize his role in the family system rather than just accepting it as normal. I'm sorry about the inheritance situation, he continued. I've told Mom and Dad I'm not comfortable with being the sole beneficiary. It's not right. While his words were welcome, I had learned to focus on actions over promises. I appreciate that, Andrew. What matters most to me now is building healthier relationships moving forward, especially with a little one on the way. Our conversation marked the beginning of a cautious reconciliation. Not an immediate restoration of close sibling bonds, but the first steps toward a more honest relationship. My parents proved more resistant to change. When informed of Andrew's lunch with me, Mom called to express concern that he was being manipulated into giving up his inheritance. The old patterns remained firmly entrenched in her worldview. 2 months later, our daughter Lily was born, a perfect, healthy baby who immediately became the center of our world. As I held her, I made a silent promise that she would always know her worth wasn't tied to achievement or neediness. She would be loved unconditionally, treated fairly, and taught healthy boundaries. My parents visited briefly after her birth, the new grandmother role temporarily softening Mom's edges. Dad seemed genuinely delighted with his granddaughter, showing more warmth than I'd seen from him in years. As I watched them with Lily, I realized something important. I could allow them in our lives on limited, carefully boundaried terms. They might never become the parents I had needed, but they could potentially be adequate grandparents if the relationship was properly structured. The journey from betrayal to healing wasn't linear or complete. There were still difficult moments, boundary violations to address, and old hurts that occasionally resurfaced. But with each passing month, the pain lost some of its sharp edges. The loan remained largely unpaid, the inheritance situation unchanged. I had made peace with both realities, recognizing them as expensive but valuable lessons about family, worth, and boundaries. In the end, the most precious inheritance I could give my daughter wasn't money or property, but the breaking of unhealthy patterns, the gift of growing up in a home where love wasn't conditional, Support wasn't transactional, and her value wasn't determined by what she could provide or how much she needed. Sometimes the family we choose, partners, friends, mentors, provides the template for healing that our biological family couldn't offer. And sometimes the greatest act of love toward future generations is recognizing what patterns need to end with us. As Lily grows, I'll teach her that family should be defined by mutual respect and care, not obligation and guilt. That boundaries are healthy, generosity should be reciprocal, and her worth is inherent, not earned or diminished by circumstance. These are the true inheritances worth passing on. What about you? Have you experienced complicated family financial dynamics or had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe to see more stories about navigating complex relationships and breaking unhealthy patterns. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and growth, and remember, sometimes the family we choose is as important as the family we're born into.